Hey, welcome everyone to another episode of Knowledge and Stories. I lost track of the number of episodes because I lost the regularity of the recording, as I mentioned in the previous episode, because of guest logistics. I won't blame anyone. Um, but I'm very happy to have not, I guess, at least on my platform and maybe on future podcasts. And I'll tell you who it's going to be in a minute. So as you guys know, this is a podcast that is number one, it's aiming to humanize this thing called lawyer and what it means to be one, right? At the end of the day, I feel you have to be a good person or be a people first and then professional. So this podcast aims to do that, aims to bring out the human side of people that we otherwise and probably are successful people, just to show that there's, a very real person behind it. And of course, lots of backstory. And I always say every fairy tale has a backstory. So, um, you know, just just to let you guys know that these are real people with real journeys, and of course, their lives and their journeys are also resources for you to pull from, right? So, and of course, to shatter the myth that this career only has one path, one track, right? There's lots of space for diversion, detour, taking it slow, and of course, also having very unloyally qualities, right? Unloyally qualities, um, and being able to fit that in to what you do as a lawyer. So today I'm very pleased to have my good new friend, fast became friends, Ratidzo Murwisi, um, my African sister from Botswana. And she's in legal tech. And as you will hear just now, she'll fully introduce herself at the risk of my missing anything out. Um, but I got to know her recently because we had a careers event, and of course, I became thoroughly schooled on the field of legal tech, which, as we just discussed now before we hit record, is like another species of lawyer. It's like a bit of an outlier in terms of the profession. But of course, as I also said before we hit record, there's a place for everyone. So I'm sure you'll get that from Wati, as I call her. That she's different. She's not your typical lawyer. She doesn't do very typically lawyerly things. And of course, she has no problem in taking over the entire platform. So without further ado, uh, I'll hand you over to Rachi and she can give you a story.
Thank you very much for that introduction. That makes you sound very well rounded, I think. But yeah, I always tell people that I am a recovering
Mm,
practicing lawyer. And even though I was only here for what most
yeah,
lawyers call 2 seconds, because I only have about 6 years of
yeah,
practice under my belt, but that's 6 years too long in my book because I never intended
mm,
to go into practice either way. I did not do a law degree to be a practicing lawyer, but I kind of just got swept in the tradition as is when you go to
yeah,
university to do an LLB. So I will introduce myself. I don't know, and I always struggle to introduce myself because I feel like I do so many different things that it's always like depends who's listening to me. Then I tell you what I do. But yes, I am a corporate lawyer, UK trained, Zimbabwe and Botswana admitted. But I am now a legal technologist. I am Botswana's first legal technologist, and I'm also an avid basketball player and an entrepreneur because, yes, I get bored and I do weird things when I get bored. So I started a business as well in alcoholic ice cream. But yes, today we're here to talk about law and what it can look like because I feel like everyone has a kind of skeleton of what law should look like. And it was only when I kind of got into the industry that I realized you can wear many hats as an LLB/BCom law holder, because it's not just go and become an advocate or go and become an attorney in a law firm. There's many different ways you can use your law degree, which I always wanted to know, because I was just like, I don't know if I'm suited for like the standard wearing an office thing. And that gown was way too heavy for me on my shoulders. I don't know. I applaud the people who wear that gown every day. You guys are warriors, but I beyond moot court and like that fake competition we were doing, I was very good at it, by the way. Like everyone thought I was gonna be like a top litigation lawyer because I was
Mm.
very good at moot court and debate. But the reality of it is very different. So now, as a legal technologist and someone who's got experience in the field, when I mentor young lawyers, I'm always saying it's a heavy robe to wear and you don't have to wear it. But if you want to wear it with pride. Whatever you do, do it with your chest, because people tend to forget that there's always expectations and they can be very heavy. You need to decide very quickly what success looks like to you, what your career looks like to you, and then kind of go forth with it. Because if you don't, you're gonna get swayed by the waves and whatever's happening, and that can be very dangerous and very heavy because it's not what you want. So it's gonna be very hard for you to kind of do it day by day if it's not what you want. And it's something I had to learn the hard way, because I decided to take a job that I had no business taking at some point in my career, and it's the first time I experienced depression. And I literally sat down when I then finally kind of unpacked it with my therapist. It was just purely because I wanted to make my parents happy, because I was like, I did a law degree, so I should be in a law firm, right? And everyone was like, yeah, you're great at it and it's going well. I hated waking up every morning going to work. It made no sense to everyone around me. And they're like, you're doing so well. And it seems, I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
on the face of it, it looks
Mm.
well, but I hate my job. And you kind of have to have like a reflective moment to be like, is this what I want? What does success look like to me? And then also then have a very frank conversation with the people around you, because that's when you realize it's usually the expectations of everyone else that you're kind of carrying. But once you decide that this is what I want to do and this is what I enjoy, you'll be able to
Yeah.
fight a bit more. Because even like now with my legal technology, it took my parents a year before they actually understood what it is I do on a daily basis. And even now it's still a bit touch and go, but I think it helps that because they're on my LinkedIn and they're also
Oh.
professionals themselves, they can kind of see what the community is doing. So
Mm.
it now makes sense. But I had to suffer a whole year of constantly being like, I'm still doing a job. I'm still using my law degree. You didn't waste your money. Don't worry. Because that's usually the case with African parents. They'll be like, I wasted all that money on a law degree and you're just going to sit
Yeah.
at home on your computer. And I'm like, no, I'm actually working. I just don't have the traditional career that goes into a
Mm.
law firm or
Mm.
goes to an office every day. I work remotely because of the nature of the industry. So, yes, I do hope you listening to this podcast episode will help you learn and know that there are other avenues, and quirky personalities doesn't necessarily mean you have to be outside in people. Like you can see my personality like this. Everyone assumes, oh, so you must be great with people. I have a very small social battery. So it's one of those things where I had to learn how to balance it. And that's why I prefer to work remotely. And I'm lucky enough to have the privilege to do that. But it is possible. You don't have to follow the traditional route. You don't have to do what everybody else is doing if you don't like it. And you are also fully capable of
Yeah.
creating your own little world and little niche, because it is more
Mm.
common than you think. And I feel like that you can only find that and only see that it's possible when you research and interact with as many people as possible. And that's why I always talk about the power of networking and kind of
Yeah.
researching on LinkedIn, because you will see various people's that are available, like resources that are available, different types of people that are there. Like you and I were talking earlier, that you never knew that there was lawyer coaches, first of all. Then there are coaches who coach lawyers specifically with ADHD. There's like a different
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
niche for everything and anything. So you will only
Mm.
find it if you're looking for it. So I really implore you to search, look into anything and everything. TikTok is also a very good place to look at. I know people trying to tend to think, oh, social media is just for fun. No, no, no. The algorithm is a wonderful thing to take advantage of. For me, I learned a lot. I learned a lot on TikTok, and I've met a lot of interesting people on TikTok because it's a very good medium to give information that a lot of professionals are now using. So I also encourage you to look into that because you might find that you're a content creator and that's a very good paying gig that's happening right now. And you could be able to kind of reach an audience or find your audience or your little community there. So, yes.
Yeah, no, that's. I think that's the fastest version. I I've heard of your story. I think one thing I want to touch on, which is very real, I think, not just in African culture. I can speak for Indian culture as well. They are the big five careers. So it's doctor, lawyer, accountant, teacher, and engineer. So any kind of engineer. So you choose any one of those big
Yeah.
five, you're safe. Anything outside of that, like you said, what are you doing with your life? Like I paid so much of money, for the degree, and now you just like, because I also had that time when I just didn't do anything with it. It was quite an evolution, literally, to come to this point. But you do get looked at funny. Even sometimes you have the degree and you decide, I want to do something else with it. Right? But I think a lot of us carry that. I don't want to use the word trauma too loosely, but I think in the sense of like the effect it has on our own psyche, where we forget ourselves, and we can't articulate, like you said, tell me about yourself. We can't articulate that. We can't articulate why did you start studying this particular field. If someone asked me that as a law student, I would have said, because it was the last thing in the prospectus and I had the points for it, They didn't say much to my personal motivation. And of course, if you dug a bit deeper, I would have said, it's actually what's expected in my culture. And I think that's something that it's more common than is articulated. I don't want to speak to other culture groups, but at least for the African and the Indian communities, there's a lot of pressure to, and I think law is one of those accessible fields for those of us that aren't scientifically inclined. You know, it's one of those, like if you're like a humanities student or an art student, you will be able to work in the legal field. You have that sort of mind, brain configuration. So I think maybe just speak to that young lawyer, or even that graduate, or first year, second year, that they got into it because of expectations. Always say you can salvage. You can salvage the situation. You can make the best of it. You can find the silver linings. You don't have to drop out, right? You can find your motivation, even if you got into it initially for the wrong reasons. So maybe just speak to that from a cultural expectation perspective, and of course, how one can salvage that as a student, as a graduate, even as a young lawyer. You still don't know, or you kind of resent your culture, your family for putting you in the position, but of course, you can't see a way out.
I like to think from my experience lately, we might think that we chose it for expectations, but to some degree, there's a reason why you've picked a certain career path, a certain degree. I think it's usually like a very few, probably like a 5, 10 percentile that fall into that hard. I'm doing this just because my parents said, or my father wanted a doctor, so I'm here. There's always a certain skill set that you have, especially if you are doing very well in the degree. And I'm talking to those people who are above the C, they're playing in the B, C average area of a law degree. I think if you find that you have that kind of resilience to make it through the degree and stuff like that, you're not in the wrong place entirely. I feel like it's now just like about finding your individuals. I like to call them superpowers because I think people take for granted just how versatile
Yeah.
a law degree is, because you need law in basically every industry that exists right now. So if you have a law degree, I'm sure there's something else that you are very passionate about. And it can be art, it can be sports, it can be basketball. Like for me, I'm passionate about basketball. I only found out halfway through my law degree that there's such a thing as sports law. And I was like, I really would have been a sports lawyer, not a corporate lawyer, because what? My two favorite
Yeah.
things, I can put them together. So it's things like that. So I genuinely think it's more about just sitting down and without any judgment and without any expectations, look at what your passions are, what your natural skills are, because also sometimes you should not mix your passion with your professional life, because your passion is your passion for a reason. It might be the thing that you use to de-stress and just generally just have a good time. So you might find that you don't want to mix it with your law degree, which is also perfectly fine. But you can also look at just the natural skills that you have, be it an affinity to numbers or you're a creative thinker. You might find that you work very well with creative industries like the media and the arts and the acting. Tech is something that's coming up very much these days. And it looks very different in different areas. You can be a product lawyer, you can be a tech lawyer, actual tech speciality. So there's a lot of nuances that are now available. But at the end of the day, it's coming to research and being honest with yourself, because I think that's usually the most difficult part of that whole journey, being honest with yourself. And once you know that, okay, I really don't like litigation. Like it's cool and I'm good at it, but do I really like it? Because we tend to forget that a job
Yeah.
is an everyday thing. So you're going to be waking up and doing it every day for the rest of your life. So it has to be something that you are capable of doing every day.
Yeah.
We don't always like our jobs, and that's normal and that's very fine. Also, you need to also be very aware of that. That there are going to be days where you're going to be like, okay, it's that job thing again. But you kind of go at it. But you can only do that if it's something that, like, at least
Yeah.
foundationally you
Yeah.
enjoy to some degree, or it comes naturally to you, so that on those days where you're really like, I don't want to do this, you can still do it in like
Yeah.
what's called autopilot mode. So you know that you're not really, you can still show up and it's not really a struggle. So I think I would say to that person, have a little sit down with yourself, reflect, and have a non-judgmental one. And I also always say, talk to your friends and ask them like what is something that you do naturally, like for me, I had people tell me, and I remember being so surprised. They're like, you're just very creative thinker, like you problem solve like very easily, like you can come into a room and be like, oh, that's what's wrong, do that, and I was just like, wait, what? I do that? They're like, yeah, every time, like anytime I have a problem, I come to you and I can bounce off you and you tell me exactly what the problem is, and I could have been sitting there for 2 weeks trying to find them. I was like, oh, okay, cool, I'm happy to help. So your friends or just people you frequently work with, they're the ones who can
Yeah.
see your superpowers much more
Yeah.
clearer than you can, because we're usually very harsh critics of ourselves. So I say, I think do that, and then you can then find a path, and then you have to do that thing that we all hate, but we have to do, which is research. And I feel like we never stop researching, but it's a very good thing to be very good at and be comfortable with doing, because that's the one thing that's going to save you and kind of guide you through all of these other things. Because when you have knowledge, it's easy to then have those difficult discussions with, so let's say, your parents or your guardians or the people who are supporting you. Because one thing that made this journey significantly easier for me was when I was telling my parents, okay, I want to do this, and I know you guys were expecting me to go down this path, but I'm going to go down this path, but this is kind of where it's going to go for now. It could change in
Yeah.
about 2 years. I'm sorry, but it's the nature of the industry. But when there's proof and kind of stuff that you can kind of look at, it's easier. And it shows also that you actually just trying to kind of make yourself go down a path. You're not just jumping
Yeah.
the deep end, be like, "Ooh, I hope I can
Right.
swim," which is also good. But when you're kind of depending on someone else, you do have to kind of bite the bullet and kind of have
Yeah.
a plan of sorts. So research is the only thing that can help you kind of devise a plan.
Yeah. I'm
So
look.
yeah.
I'm all for that. I will definitely validate. having a having a plan, um, and doing the research, because even if you decide against it, obviously you're still making an informed decision. So it's not like research is going to push you in it's going to
Exactly.
solidify something. It can very well push you away from what you're researching towards. So all the research will just discourage you, which is fine. At the end of the day, if you're rejecting that particular legal career path, then you're doing so in a most informed fashion, and hopefully, because you did it in an informed fashion, you're not going to have regrets about um, rejecting it. And of course, like you said, you don't know where you're going to end up. So you can reject it now because you're not ready for it. You don't take yourself seriously enough. But that thing could rear its head, 10 years down the line. And it was something that you gave up, something that you rejected, and you realize, okay, why is it coming up now again? Maybe this is actually for me. So you may reject it initially. You may even choose something, research and then choose something, and it not be forever. On the flip side, it not be forever. And you might only do it for a year, 2 years, in your case, 5 years. And then it's done. We're done. And it's like, okay, it's only one part of your evolution in the legal world. Like, what's next? So they could also do that. But I think one thing we should always encourage students, graduates, it's never too late to start planning. And of course, part of planning is to do all of your research. Because people like us, we create the conversations, we give the platforms. But at the end of the day, the responsibility is up to. We can't tell you what career fits you. We can't tell you what we can advise you, but at the end of the day, the choice is yours. Um, and Rati, one thing I wanted to,
But
yeah,
research also helps you, sorry, but also research helps you find people like you. And then you can actually have a real life. Because, like, for me, if I hadn't done as much research, I wouldn't have found people who were also trying to navigate the
mm,
space just like I was. So I found that, oh my gosh, I can pivot. Just because I have a corporate law degree doesn't mean I
yeah,
have to stay in corporate and I have to do it this way. I found other people who had the exact same background in me who were doing
mm,
something totally different. And I'm like, ooh, that's a bit too different for me. I
yeah,
can't go that hard left. I'll do a short left. And then maybe
yeah,
graduate to the hard left. So it shows you different things and it
mm,
opens your eyes
mm,
a bit more. I think for me, I'm always just like, it makes you
yeah,
aware of what's
yeah,
possible and maybe just how far you can take it, or maybe the starting point of where you can take it, because you might be the person who takes up after that person who you found and takes
absolutely,
it even
yeah,
further. So I just think research just makes you see what is possible and what is currently out there, and maybe gives you an idea to be like, oh, okay, I might just make this even bigger. You might be the person we've been
yeah,
waiting for 10 years and
yeah,
you didn't know it. So I was just say research, there's knowledge is power, and it really does open your eyes to a lot of different things. And I always just say, don't limit yourself to like a
yeah,
geographical area as well. Just go as wide as you possibly can. Like, even go as far as Singapore and China, whatever. I know you might be in Southern Africa and you think, can it really apply to me? You never
yeah.
know. You might end up there, or you might end up doing something unique for South Africa or Botswana just because you actually have the capacity to
Yeah,
do
I've
it.
got I've
So,
got I've got fans
yeah.
in Rwanda. I mean,
So it happens. I have a fan in
who'd have
Madagascar
thunk who'd
who
have
reached
thunk
out to me
it?
this month. I was like, wait, what?
So yeah,
Exactly. And it's just because you're putting yourself out
something I
there.
want to touch on. I think again on this parental expectations or family expectations is this whole. And I did a post about this. I think a couple of months back, where I encountered somebody that was was the son or the father solicited my help in mentoring his son. Um, so obviously there was a lot of generational lawyers in the family type of thing, and
Mm.
very abruptly terminated the relationship, which was a mentorship relationship. Um, and it made me think. You know, what did I say? What did I, you know, and what I was telling, what I essentially told that young man in the sessions was that, and I'm going to come around to how you fit into this, is you may have um, a family of lawyers or family of another type of professional, and there's always that pressure. So even that the thing is chosen for you, right? Like whether you have the aptitude for law or not. And in your case, both your parents are accountants, right? If I remember correctly, right? Like high flying accountants. And yes, there was pressure for you to choose the numbers field, right? But of course, you broke away, right? And I know other people that both parents are very successful in one field, but they didn't feel the pressure to actually stay in that field. And their parents actually gave them the freedom to do something else. But always tell people, look, you choose, if you're going to make sure you differentiate, make sure you carve out your own way of doing things. Yes, you there's a part of that legacy, in your family that will always be with you, and it'll be part of the branding or whatever. But you will have to learn how to incorporate that legacy and also differentiate your own path at the same time. And I feel like people that don't do that, and I'm talking about those out there that with parents or maybe you're the fourth, fifth generation lawyer in your family, it was kind of, pre-cut for you, the career. And you've got to differentiate quickly because you don't want to end up resenting the career because you just sort of melded into the whole thing. It's a family business. And, there's still a place for you. There's still a way for you to differentiate yourself. And that's why what I essentially told the young man in the few sessions that we had that yes, his dad's legacy is very important. You needed, in fact, I said, have a chat with your dad. Ask him what it was like to start a law firm during apartheid. Okay, chat with him, talk to him, ask him what it was like, and embrace that legacy. But at the same time, it's not your legacy. You have to. You're gonna do law, even if you take over your dad's firm. You're going to do law in a slightly different, and you have to be okay with that. You're not going to do it exactly like your ancestors did or your father. So maybe just talk to that decision if there was, and it sounds like you have a very open relationship with your parents. Um, where that decision not to become an accountant, not to follow the family, the parental, the matriarch and the patriarch, not to follow them, but to forge your own path.
So that was a very tricky conversation for me initially. Because like you said, both my parents are accountants, and my oldest sister, I have three sisters. Number
Mm,
two is also an accountant. Her husband are both accountants. But number one is a nurse. She literally came out like running and said, I'm not going to be an accountant. I don't like numbers. And she was a nurse. But because she chose one of those careers, my parents were like, oh, that's fine. She went into medicine. Well, cool. Number two went and did accounting. So they were like, oh, okay, that's fine. And then I came along. I decided I want to be a corporate lawyer in
mm,
standard seven because my
okay.
godfather's a corporate lawyer. And he had like when I was at school, he had one of those
Uh
bring your
huh.
child to
Uh huh.
school day to work days, and he took me, and I was like, so this whole time I thought I wanted to be an accountant. Turns out no, I want to be a corporate lawyer. So I remember coming home that day and telling my parents, I've discovered what I want to do. And so for the longest time, I think my parents thought it was one of those, she's just
Yeah.
having an excitement thing. She discovered a new career. Yeah. And then fast forward to like O levels and Cambridge, like Form Fours. And I was like, no, actually, this is what I want to do. I'm even choosing my subjects in alignment with that for my O levels and A levels. And I even applied for university a year early and I already knew which universities I wanted to go to. So I think that kind of further solidified in their minds that, okay, I'm really not going to do accounts. Um, I'm not going to become an accountant. I loved accounts, which was weird. I think so. My mom kind of accepted it much quicker. My dad, because I was very close to my dad when I was much younger. I used to work for him every school holiday at his accounting firm. So he was just like, "But you were with me every school holiday. What do you mean you're still gonna do corporate law?" And I was like, I was doing all of this. Did you not notice? I was doing all the legal stuff. So anytime you had your clients, I was always doing the corporate governance stuff. I was liking the company law stuff. So it was always still
Yeah,
very legal. And he was like, actually, he's like, whoa, wait, yeah, you really will. I was like, yeah, those are the things I'm drawn to in accounting. So it still kind of
yeah,
matches. So for the beginning, I kind of had to niche it as it's a combination. It's law and finance. My degree is law and finance. So for a while, it was that. But I always tell people with that kind of parental pressure that the only way you can ever win the argument is if it's something you also have to give pushback to, but you have to show that that is what you want. So it comes up like with me, all the subjects I chose were very aligned to doing corporate law. All the stuff I was involved in was still very much fashioned to
yeah.
following that path. But I think for my parents, what kind of turned it over is we had a family friend that they were a family of doctors and they wanted their child to be a doctor. And it was weird because all of us as kind of outsiders knew that this young man had no passion for medicine. He was very good
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
sciences and all of that stuff, but he was like a very natural actor. Like
yeah,
he loved drama
yeah,
and like the creative arts.
yeah.
That was his thing. So I remember like when he was like, I'm going to uni, and we're like, you're actually going to do medicine. He's like, yeah, no, my parents said I should do this and that. And I was just like, whoa, okay. We didn't see this one coming. Fast forward to 5 years later, he finished a whole medical degree. He was
Mm,
valedictorian of the class, and he did very well at university. And we're like, oh, okay, maybe he actually could do well at this doctor thing. His valedictorian speech was, "Here's your degree, mom and dad. I'm done. I'm gonna go do my arts degree now. Thanks, bye." And he
oh,
walked off the stage. And I remember my parents being like, "We're never going to force you to do what you don't want to do. Okay, what do you want to do?" And I was like, what? They're like, no, that is so
mm,
embarrassing. What do you mean? That was a speech. And he was like, no. And after that, so for me, I think that
mm,
kind of helped my parents then be like, okay, no, clearly, if you want to be
yeah,
a lawyer, do that. Don't embarrass us 5 years later, do that. So I think the shame for them
yeah,
kind of was like, whoa. But I then always just tell my mentees that you just have to be very open and forthright as much as
yeah,
you can. And it comes within the small things. It means you have to be very intentional about
mm,
what you want to do. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be an uphill battle because I was like, even with me, I had
mm,
to still fight it the whole way through, all the way up to my master's. I still had my parents questioning me, like, are you sure you don't want to switch degrees? Like, this law thing seems a bit, you have to, every time you move countries you have to do a new exam set and all of this. Are you sure? And I was like, listen, I was prepared for this. This is
mm,
the hill I'm dying on. So I think if you are
yeah,
just very sure of yourself, it will show and they'll stop
yeah,
questioning you. So you have to be sure with what you, which is why I said you have to have honest conversations with
yeah,
yourself continuously, because also where I started is not where I am right now. So I was very sure I was
mm,
always going to be a corporate lawyer until I actually got into practice, and I was just like, whoa, this is not what it
mm,
looks like on TV or what I saw my godfather doing when I was 12. It's not the same. So you also have to be open to what you want is going to evolve with time, also with who you are as a person, with all your experiences that you're going to go through. University is going to be an experience and it'll take you through a lot of different paces and you're going to experience a few things. And then you're going to do your internships and your articles and stuff like that. You might find you don't want to do what you thought you wanted to do, and that's okay. I think the one thing you always have to remember is it's
yeah,
okay to change your mind. You're human. You're going to change your mind at least twice at some point during your degree, and that's fine. You have to be comfortable with that. It's just as long as you are certain that it's you making the decision and no one else is making it for you, all the outside noise will not matter when you are sure. The outside noise only
yeah.
matters when
That's a
you are
good point.
unsure of yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's something that I've only learned later. later in life, but I think the younger you are, the younger you start off having this conversation, then you're going to feel, I guess you're going to individuate yourself so that outside expectations, pressures, they just remain on the outside. And of course, when it comes to like parents' expectations and all of those things, you're able to articulate, look, guys, I take your, I accept that what you're saying is wise, it has merit, it has value, and I can certainly factor it into my decision, but at the end of the day, the decision remains with me. And I think the if you have those conversations with yourself at intervals, life only gets harder, right? Like you said, your parents kept. I
Yeah.
mean, if mine ever did that, like all the way up to maybe my getting into the bar, like, are you sure? Are you sure? Is this what you want to do? I think I would have blown a gasket, to be honest, because I wasn't who I am now then. Now I'll be a lot better able to stand my ground and say, look, I get what you guys are saying, but I'm making this decision because of X, Y, and Z, or I'm not taking this decision because of X, Y, and Z. Like, I know why I want it, when I want it, how I want it, why I don't want it, subparagraphs included. So I think it's very important from a young age to have those, those conversations with yourself, and also to know where, like, because let's take the assumption most parents are well meaning. They just want you to be cared for and to have a career that's going to pay your bills and whatnot, right? So I think if you constantly reassure them that you are taking those things into account, you're not being reckless, you know, um, then I think if they are reasonable people, then of course eventually they will back off and they'll say, okay, we sort of kind of trust her to make the right decision. And I think with your dad's name probably
Yeah.
was like the betrayal. Because I think I
Oh no, trust me. He was just like, "Oh my gosh, you were going to
you
be
led
my
me on,
legacy.
like
What are you doing?" And I was like,
you led me
"So
on.
yeah." I was like, "No, I'm still gonna be your legacy. I'm just gonna take over the family business and do something
Uh,
different with it." And he's like, "Oh," and I was like, "Yeah, you just
yeah.
didn't catch on." I did say it frequently, and so and also another thing is you're gonna have to
Mm,
grow a very thick skin. This sounds very nice as I'm saying it, like, yes, just because you are sure in yourself, there are going to be some
yeah.
very difficult conversations. There were times when me and my parents were not even talking because they were just like, we're not happy with this. And I was like, I know you're not happy. And I knew you were not going to be happy, but do you want to be unhappy for 2 months or be unhappy and paying my bills for the rest of my life? Let's. And he was like, wait, what? I was like, yeah, that's what's about to happen. I'm gonna be miserable for the rest of my life. So I'm gonna keep coming to you and saying, you made me choose this,
Mm,
so do. And he was like, oh, okay, whoa, wait, I don't want to do that. And I was like, yeah. And also for me, unfortunately, it actually did happen. They made me. I listened to parental expectations and I took a job I had no business taking, like I said, and it led to me having a full on mental breakdown. And then I had to literally, I was forced to take a break. And then my parents were like, wait, what happened? And I was like, exactly what I told you was going to happen. I hated my job. And because I had to pretend every day that I liked my job, that takes a toll on you mentally and physically. And one day I was just like, I can't. And even my bosses could see it and they were like, no, no, take a time out. You're not okay. And I was like, when other people are now telling you, and they are strangers, they're not people you frequently interact with, are telling you take a break, that's when you know you're going down a very dangerous road to take a
yeah.
break. So after that happened as well, my parents were a bit more, definitely a bit more open to listening to me. And I'm just like, okay, we don't have to, which is kind of the unfortunate part. But the fortunate part is now when my little sister is now coming in to the fore with her career stuff, they are definitely more open to be like, okay,
Yeah.
what is it that you want to do?
Yeah.
We've learned the hard way with this one here that we could lose you over something that is not
Yeah.
that serious.
Yeah.
So it's always I genuinely always say I hope you don't ever experience that, because that's never fun, and not everyone
Yeah.
recovers from it as well. So I always say, for you to prevent that, be a bit more strong. And also I always tell people, being strong in your boundaries and standing your ground does not mean being aggressive and being combative and being defensive, because I was like, there's different ways to get your point across. Sometimes I found I had to write all my feelings down, because I told my parents, talking to you verbally is very triggering for me,
Hmm.
because it then becomes a back and forth, and then I feel
Yeah.
like I'm being disrespectful when all I'm
Yeah.
trying to do is express my feelings. So because I'm a lawyer and writing is something I do very well, I was
Hmm.
just like, I'm just going to put everything on a piece of paper and give it to you, and then you read it, and then you
Hmm.
come back to me, and I'll give you time to process. Because I was like, for me also, naturally, I'm not a person of many words. Like, I'm very wary of what I say, because I know people tend to remember your words more than what you've actually done sometimes. So with these conversations, because they're important, find the best way with your parents or your guardians to communicate what it is that you're feeling or what you want, because those conversations are always going to be very heavy conversations, and they're never easy, especially if you are coming from a very tricky family dynamic as well. Because I always like to kind of take all of that into context as well, because a lot of people who have these kind of family expectation issues, there's also like a very tricky family dynamic.
Hmm.
So I'm always just like, be very be very wary about how you handle it. But if you can, if you have a sibling or someone who can help you kind of push the narrative a bit better, also do get that help, because sometimes there's power in numbers
Yeah.
depending on who you're dealing with. So I always just say, but always having an advocate for also what you want
Hmm.
is always very useful, because people tend to hear it a bit better. Parents
Hmm.
tend to hear it a bit better. Also, if that advocate
Yeah.
is an adult, because once another adult is kind of co-signing what you're saying, the conversation does become
Hmm.
significantly easier.
No, that's
So
I
yeah,
know.
no, there's
The
that too.
moral of the podcast is not to get a job to prove your parents wrong, not to get and not to study something
Exactly.
to prove a point. You have to, yeah,
Do something
you
you
have to, and of
love.
course, as soon as you notice the warning signs, get your crew. I always say, like you said, advocates. Get people that you can talk to who can
Mhm.
eventually vouch for you, advocate for you. Ideally, a mentor, somebody like Martin said was an adult, um, that will be able
Mhm.
maybe to mediate between you and your parents, because you don't want to come to that point, um, like she did, where you actually have a proper mental breakdown, and then now during what you just have not only have to recover from that, you have to now recalibrate your career, and it's never the ideal road to go down. So if you are currently or you being pushed into this legal thing, against your will, and don't feel like you have much of a voice, try to reach out. People like me, like Rati, I'm sure there are others, maybe local lawyers in your community, before the warning lights stop flashing and it's too late. We don't want anyone to. In fact, I'd rather tell you to give up, than push on and damage yourself, and of course, completely hate law and have all this trauma related to the career where you never want to touch it again because of what happened. You never ever want that. You don't want that relationship to the career to be tainted to the point where you might never recover your. Maybe you did have a love for it, or maybe you were getting somewhere, but it's just all this external pressure. So please get a squad, get a crew, get help. Notice the signs, like Tati said, write down your things on paper. Get a sibling. You know, there are ways to amplify your voice to say, I really don't want to do this, or I don't want to do it now. Right? It's also very real. You might want to explore something else now. Maybe you want to study a BA and then do an LLB, and then combine the two. So again, the research component of things will help you also to know what you want. So you say, you know what, mom and dad, this is my plan. I do want to study law, or I don't want to do law now. I want to do law at a later stage, but I want to start with maybe a BA, and then I want to build on it later, or whatever it might be, right? So having that research done, doing your homework in a sense, will also help to back your voice with some data and some research and some facts, like cold hard facts. At the end of the day, most of our parents just want
But
us to be in a career that can support us. And that's, you know,
But also, I'd like to say there are some people who will have the unfortunate situation of, even after all of this, your parents still say it's either
mm,
this or nothing. I feel like if you are in that situation, I think, like we say, research will help you know the best way forward to kind of navigate it, because it means you're going to have to find something that you love
yeah,
in that degree or whatever it is that you're doing. So you genuinely researching or talking to people and networking will then help you kind of find your niche in that area. Because I do have people that come to me and say, I've been told that it's either I do a law degree or they're not going to pay for anything, and I don't have money, so what do I do? So you're like, okay, no, that also is a very common thing in other people's lives. So you now have to sit down and be like, okay, these are the cards I have been dealt with, and I have to find a way to navigate this, still using my superpowers. So, again, if you've had that conversation with yourself that's honest and you know what your natural skills are, what your natural talents are, start to find ways that you can incorporate those things into the current situation that you're in. You kind of reach out to your, I don't know if you're your personal tutor or the career advisor at your university, and be like, okay, this is where I am. Do you have any advice or any ideas of how I can navigate this space with this kind of skill set or these kind of superpowers? Also, reaching out to people in LinkedIn who look like you or who might do something that you like. You can only do that if you're actually actively looking for people who have these quote unquote superpowers that you have. Because it's all nice for us to say talk to your parents and talk to the people. Sometimes you still do
yeah,
all of that and it still doesn't work. So you still then have to then have that very difficult conversation with yourself that, okay, I can't move, I can't change their minds, I can't move this needle. So I now have to figure out how to navigate the space I'm in. So now that's what it is, and that goes for people who are stuck in the degree whatever, or people who are now doing the exams, and you're stuck, and it's that weird space where I have to do the exams to get admitted, but I really don't like this, but I won't be able to get a job, I won't be able to move forward if I don't pass this stage. So I feel like it's a very difficult space to be in, and I would not
yeah,
wish that on anyone, but it's the fact of some people's lives. So you then have to find a way to navigate that. And I would say build a community of people who care about you and who love you and who will constantly reassure you and give you that motivation through those moments, because that's the only thing that's going to carry you through that very difficult stage. But be
mm,
reminded it's a stage. It will pass and you will get through it. And you will have a degree that you can use
yeah,
somewhere, somehow at the end of the day, because, like we said, the law degree is
yeah,
one of the most versatile law degrees that you can
yeah,
find right now. So you will find a way to use it in almost any industry that you do choose
mm,
to pivot into if you choose to say law is not a thing. And,
yeah,
but yeah, have a community. I think also I had forgotten to mention that having a community is very important. People around you who remind you who you are, what your skills
mm,
are, what your talents are, and what you're good at. Because sometimes in these kind of difficult spaces, we kind of forget who we are and what we're capable of. And we just think, oh my gosh, I am a
mm,
failure. I can't do nothing. You didn't get at that
yeah,
stage with nothing. Like you are clearly
yeah.
someone who has something in between the ears and you're fully capable of
Mm.
doing almost anything you set your mind to. So
That's a
yeah.
nice place to land the plane. Um, there's always, I think, there's always a way. It's always a choice. It's always a way of escape,
Hmm.
as inescapable as the situation may seem, at least career wise. There's always something, and I feel like if you join the more self-aware you become, the more you can join the dots for yourself. And like you said, superpowers. How can I marry this degree with one of my superpowers? Maybe it's empathy, maybe it's being authentic, maybe it's being creative, whatever. How can I marry this with that? And of course, you can create a third option, which is to create the career that you. But of course, that's a whole other. So, Rati, I know you have to go now. So thank you for another conversation. We never run out of things to talk about, and I know this one was packed, jam packed, and I hope our listeners can come back to this episode because some random statement that either one of us said. Okay, not to blow our own trumpets, but it may change the trajectory of your life. And I'm speaking from experience. I'm sure Rati has had those experiences where you don't know what you said, but of course somebody was changed, somebody
Definitely.
was put on a different path simply maybe because you just validated them or gave them the space to be themselves. So thank you, Rati. I appreciate you, and of course our growing uh, friendship. I would say our relationship moved quickly.
Definitely. Definitely. Quicker
Yeah,
than we both
we haven't
expected.
taken it to the next level yet, but which will be to meet in person, but sooner rather than later. So thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Rati, for giving us your advice, which I'm sure was a mostly a complimentary mentorship session, at least from your end. Because it's something that we just jump into, a role we just jump into without being, those of us that that's our superpower, we just jump into it without realizing it. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, and I look forward to more episodes with you.
We definitely look forward to more. And hopefully
I
we
think
helped
we,
somebody.
if it is
Or
just one,
five.
that's enough.
Definitely. All right.
Okay.